This is big. Well, actually, no, it's smaller, but that's kind of the point. Why is nobody talking about this? Hamilton has taken one of their most iconic dive watches and made it in a size that is suitable for mere mortals like me and you. It's now, I think, a very real rival to things like the Longines Hydro Conquest, the Tag Heuer Formula 1, the Oris Aquis. So, without further ado, let's get into it. The Hamilton Frogman traces its roots right back to World War II, to the US Navy, which used the watch in operation against Japanese Army and Naval forces, particularly in their underwater demolition teams. The original watch was a success in this role because it was highly legible, it had large hands, it had generous lume, it had an easy to read dial, and it had an impressive crown guard that initially, in the early version, was designed to provide extra waterproofing. In 1951, after the war, Hamilton mass-produced the Frogman and debuted it to the public, and this coincided with the release of The Frogmen, which was a film that told the story of these daring Navy demolition teams. So let's come back to 2023. The Frogman is still living on, and finally, it's down to a size that I can wear. So let's take a look. Here we are then, the Hamilton Khaki Navy Frogman in the 41mm diameter. So running through some specs, with 20mm lug width on this, so lots of choices for strap changes, sapphire crystal of course, thickness is only 13.1, which for a 300-meter diver I think is very good, and that is at the top of the slightly domed crystal as well. I'm not saying that it's going to be perfect with a shirt, but I think you could probably get a shirt over the top of it. Powering the watch is the Hamilton H10 movement, 80-hour power reserve and no plastic parts within this one. The weight is 187 grams with no links removed, 44mm lug to lug. The effective lug to lug though is 50mm, and that's because you've got male end links there. So that's the total distance with those folded down, as far as they'll go. And finally the price, $11.95 USD at retail, but that's not to say you won't occasionally find a little bit of discount on these as well. Let's start with the dial. It's a black dial, and for the most part it looks matte. Under loupe, however, you'll see there's some texture in there, like very fine grains of sand that have been finished over. In full light, it does appear ever so slightly more grey, and then in darker light, it's more black, and the texture is less visible. You've got the Hamilton logo printed at the top, automatic and 300 meters / 1000 feet underneath. Looking at the indices, 12 o'clock is a number 12, and then the rest of the hour markers are all just rectangular applied indices. Everything is filled with a nice coating of lume, which we'll move on to later. And the hands, an interesting set. So you have a sword style orange minute hand. The hour hand, I don't really know how to describe. It looks a little bit like an Olympic torch. If this has an official name, let me know in the comments. And the seconds hand is an elongated orange arrow. Aside from the splashes of colour, everything else is polished and everything is lumed. The case is mostly brushed in terms of finishing, although on both sides you've got upper and lower chamfers which are polished just to stop it being a little bit too dull. At the 9 o'clock there's a small protruding portion which has got the Hamilton logo inside of what looks like a kind of bead blasted square. It actually makes a really nice and interesting effect on this watch, and it's not too much. And of course, on the side of the 3 o'clock, you've got the crown and the crown guard, which we'll talk about a little bit later. The case back is nothing remarkable, just the Hamilton logo, a little bit of information on the watch, and the scuba mask. What's most interesting about the case back is the fact that for a 300-meter diver, it's relatively slim. The bezel itself is polished, but despite this, it's incredibly easy to grip. It's got large, chunky knurling on it, and I have no issues, even with wet hands, to turn this bezel. The insert is stainless steel, it's polished where you have the numerals and the hour markers. There's a lume pip at the 12 o'clock, and the rest of the finish is the same sort of matte bead blasted effect that you get on the side where the Hamilton logo is. It looks really cool. How does the rotation feel? Actually, really good. These are 60 extremely well defined clicks, leaving you no doubt when you've jumped a minute. The bracelet looks superb on this watch, and it's a little bit different. When I say a free link bracelet, you would think of something else, but this has got Hamilton's own design touch on it. There's a raised portion in the middle, it's more squared off than other watches, and that raised portion has got polished chamfers which play nicely with the light. The clasp is a milled outer, milled inner with some really nice finishing, especially on the inner part. The Hamilton logo is engraved in the bottom, and there's 2 holes of micro adjust. Without doubt, the most distinctive feature on this watch is the crown guard, and as mentioned, historically, something around the crown has always been a big feature on the Frogman. The question I've been asked the most since I bought this watch is, how does the crown operate with that crown guard? It's actually pretty simple. Let me show you. Despite the crown guard, setting the time and winding the watch is no different. Unscrew the crown, and the crown guard and the crown will pop out of the case as one assembly. From here, you'll be able to set the time by pulling it all the way out, or just in the first position, be able to wind the watch. The Hamilton is filled on the indices and the hands with superluminova, I'm guessing BGW9. You can see it holds its own very well against my Lume champion, the Proxima, which is on the left, and the Hamilton is long lasting. The BGW9 might not always be as instantly bright, but it does really well over long periods of time, and I've had no issues with this watch being able to read the time in the morning. I didn't know what to expect from the Hamilton on the time grapher, but I'm definitely not disappointed. We're running well within COSC specification, and my experience with the watch on the wrist is I'm not really gaining or losing at all as the days roll on by. So I'm super happy with this, great amplitude and fantastic rate. Beat error ever so slightly high at 0.4, obviously it would be a dream to have 0, but overall I'm really happy with this performance. It's not the elephant in the room, but the crown guard on the wrist. I'm left-handed, I wear my watches on my right hand, so this, and also like ball hydrocarbon watches I've had in the past, I never have any issues. But if you wear the watch on your left hand, and you wear it loose, and you wear it at the bottom of your wrist, past even the wrist bone, very close to your hand, I think you're going to have some contact there with your hand. If you wear the watch a little bit further back, behind the protruding wrist bone, then I think you're going to have no problem on either wrist, but it's something to be aware of because I know some people do like to wear their watches loose, and I think with this one, you'll struggle with that. This was so close to the perfect bracelet. I absolutely love the finishing, I love the design, and I love the quality of the clasp, both inner and outer, but 2 holes of micro adjust spaced this far apart is not great. Small nitpick to finish, there has to be a way to stop the last links on the bracelet from rubbing against the clasp. I've seen this on a few different watches, and it doesn't look like a very difficult engineering challenge to overcome. If you remove the outdated clasp, it's almost impossible to find anything to dislike about this watch, especially objectively. I really like the design, but I appreciate it might not be to everybody's taste. But even if not, you have to appreciate the prestige and history of this range from Hamilton, and of course of Hamilton themselves. For a package of this quality from a major Swiss brand, it feels phenomenal value for money, and I think it puts some of its competitors to shame, and this is what I really want to touch upon in the conclusion.
Yes or no, this is your last chance, no beating around the bush.
Reviewing this watch for me was really interesting. When you actually review a watch, you have to think objectively, and it forces you to think about each aspect of the watch, which you don't necessarily do when you're just collecting something. I was surprised by just how well the Hamilton scored in almost every category of my review. The fit and finish was excellent, the lume was excellent, the design was unique, it had history, it's comfortable on the wrist, the bezel is excellent. There's so much to like, and then when I look at the price tag, I really do think this reflects badly On Tag Heuer with the automatic Formula 1, again with the bracelet, a comparable watch, and also with the Longines Hydro Conquest. Now I know Longines have just released a newer model and I haven't had my hands on that yet, but certainly the previous generation I owned one, and whilst it was a cool watch, it was really let down in a few areas, particularly the loom, and also the slab-sided case wasn't particularly comfortable on the wrist either. In addition to this, the bezel was difficult to grip, and it did have polished center links, which was not something that I particularly enjoy on a dive watch. Take all these factors into consideration, and bear in mind that that watch costs more than this Hamilton. To me, it doesn't make any sense. So that's what I think about the new reduced size Hamilton Frogman. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. If you think there's a better, circa $1,000 Swiss dive watch, also let me know in the comments. I'm keen to hear your thoughts. I mentioned in the last video there will be a giveaway watch for 1,000 subscribers. That watch has now arrived, so that will be the topic of the next video. If you don't want to miss that, please subscribe to the channel. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up, it means a lot. Thank you so much for your support, and I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.